Listen up. I could take you down anytime I want. You know?
John sneered as he edged closer to me. I wasn't entirely sure that John was doing anything illegal. After all, there was no way I could have seen all the data on his PC in that short amount of time. But judging by his behavior, I was pretty sure he was up to no good.
You're no match for me. Just keep your head down and stay out of trouble.
How much more does he need to look down on me before he's satisfied? I was getting angry at John's attitude, treating people like they're nothing. So, you're cheating, huh?
Shut up, you scum.
It infuriated me that he could cheat, insult others without any remorse, and live it up with the money he made dishonestly.
What's with that defiant look? Don't tell me you think you can beat me.
I had been holding back all this time. I owed a lot to my father-in-law for giving his blessing to my marriage. Above all, it was because he was part of my wife's family. But now, my wife, Emily, has completely fallen under John's influence. She neither defends nor supports me anymore. The moment I thought I didn't have to endure it any longer, something snapped inside me. I will never forgive you. I vowed to myself to revisit everything that had happened up to now with John. My name is Steven Tyler. I'm a 60-year-old who runs a real estate business. I used to live with my wife Emily, also 60. But last month, suddenly, I got a call from my in-law's house saying that my father-in-law was not in good health. My in-laws are well-known locals, a family of politicians that goes back generations. Living at the in-laws' house are my parents-in-law and John and his wife. My father-in-law was a politician, but he retired 2 years ago due to his health. My mother-in-law, originally frail, had needed care for several years. It was John and his wife who had asked my wife, John's sister, if we could look after their parents. Unable to abandon our parents, we decided to live together at the in-laws' house and thus begin our life living with John's family. I was reluctant to live together. I was aware that John didn't think highly of me. John is highly educated and carries the pride of a family of politicians. In contrast, as a high school graduate, I felt John looked down on me. Since the beginning of our marriage, he had opposed his sister marrying me and frequently made statements that I was not part of their family. At the time, my father-in-law convinced John, and I was able to marry Emily successfully, but the rift between John and me has never healed. Yet, John had me join his political support group and asked for financial support for his campaigns. I felt used by John, but I complied in silence because of my wife's position. I was worried whether I could ever get along with John. Soon after moving in, John started pushing household chores and his parents' care onto me. I thought since my in-laws' family was well off, why not just hire a maid? But it soon became clear why we were called to live with them. John and his wife's extravagant spending was becoming conspicuous. Even for a wealthy family, there are limits. Born into money, John probably doesn't understand what an ordinary life looks like. However, one saving grace is that John and his wife eat out almost every day, so there's no need to prepare meals. Right after moving in, my wife and I discussed and decided on a division of labor. Emily would handle the household chores and care for the parents. I would manage our finances. John's attitude towards me was the worst. Not recognizing me as family, John, proud of his distinguished family background and political stature, tended to look down on me, who was not in the same position.
I don't consider you family. The most I can do is treat you as part of the household.
To John, it seems I am not family but merely someone to be used at his convenience. Despite my wife and I handling the household, John constantly has to chip in.
You only have a high school diploma, so you're not well educated. That's why I'm giving you advice. Be grateful.
Sure, I'm just a high school graduate. I think I've done quite well for myself, but John doesn't see it that way.
Just because you have a high school diploma, do you think you are doing the same level of work as us? That's not the case. I am a politician, and you're just a high school grad. You'll never surpass me. Get that into your head.
If he thinks he's so perfect, he should handle everything himself. I was furious with John's words, taking advantage of us, yet always trying to dominate. But this is his family's home, and I'm completely out of my element here. Even my wife thinks that whatever John says must be right. I have no one on my side here. And it's not just that I was unhappy with my situation at my in-laws' place. My salary was entirely eaten up by living expenses here. The amount John and his wife spend is especially outrageous. I was getting sick of this lifestyle. Every day, John and his wife would go out to eat and come back. When John returned, I tried asking him to cut back on eating out a bit. But what came back from John were words that insulted me.
You think you can advise me? You're 100 years too early. It's your fault, weed out. I'm embarrassed to sit at the same table as someone with just a high school diploma like you.
Then, I'll change the time I eat, I suggested.
What do you mean by telling me what to do? How do you think you can survive in this family? Don't you realize you're out of place in this house?
I thought it was unreasonable since they had asked us to come here. I had known all along, but John was not someone who would listen to me. I gave up on replying, thinking that whatever I said to John would be a waste.
Ever since you came here, I feel like our family's reputation has dropped.
He muttered that as he went back to his room.
You better think about who you're talking to.
Mary snapped at me, and I struggled to hold back my anger. I was dissatisfied with the things John and his wife said and their attitude toward me. I wondered how I could ever get along with them and started to think about it every day. A few days later, I finally discussed it with my wife, but she insisted that John was right. I did think I was at a disadvantage here, but I hadn't thought that my wife would side with John so much. From that day on, my wife's attitude changed. What surprised me the most was that my wife started to join in on John's harassing remarks towards me.
It's so embarrassing I can't tell anyone I have a high school grad in my family.
Me too. It's embarrassing to say that my husband is such a low-level person. I'm sorry for all the troubles he has caused you, John, Mary.
My wife had started to say things like John would. Far from supporting me, she began to side with John and corner me. I tried to convince my wife, Emily, to at least be on my side. Have you always seen me this way?
But I agree with John. If you were like him, I could have had a life like his wife's.
I don't know if living with John and his wife influenced Emily or if she always thought this way. However, it's certain that her mindset changed rapidly after coming here.
If you're so against John's ideas, then surpass him. and show me.
Her words made me feel sad. What have I done to deserve this? I've tried my best to make her happy, but was it all for nothing? I felt like my heart was tearing apart. These were troubling days for me, but then something even more upsetting happened. One day, when I returned from work, I found John, his wife, and Emily in the living room, looking at me as if I were a criminal. What's going on? I couldn't stand their stares and asked, only for John to accuse me unbelievably.
You've been cheating on Emily behind her back.
What? Apparently, they were under the impression that I was having an affair. It must have been Emily who fed this false information to John and his wife. Wait a minute.
You really are scum.
Emily, you should dump this guy fast.
I was viciously insulted by John and his wife for something I didn't do. I desperately tried to defend myself, but they wouldn't listen. I couldn't accept it and wanted to confront Emily about why she spread these lies. I waited for a moment when she was alone and confronted her. Why would you tell such a lie?
It's not a lie. Don't talk to me. I want a divorce.
She said this and quickly left. The only person I could talk to between Emily and John's family was my father-in-law. But he had become bedridden and was in no condition to talk. I felt completely isolated and filled with despair. That's when it happened.
Hey, if you feel bad about cheating, why don't you at least help Emily with the cleaning? I don't think it will make her forgive you, but it's better than doing nothing, right?
Mary said that to me. I followed Mary's advice. I told myself that an opportunity to defend myself would come eventually, so I had to wait. Given that it was a wealthy family's home, it was extremely large and the cleaning was a chore. I silently cleaned the living room, kitchen, and all the rooms. And then, it happened while I was cleaning John's room. While cleaning the desk, I accidentally touched the mouse. Suddenly, the monitor lit up. Apparently, it had not been powered off. The PC was in sleep mode. Just as I was about to turn it off, I saw something on the monitor, records of cash income. Looking closer, there was an unusually large amount of cash recorded, including many amounts listed as public activity expenses. Is this fraud? Thinking this, I hurried back to my room to grab a USB drive and copied the data from John's PC. As I was about to leave John's room, John, who had just returned, caught me.
What are you doing?
Just cleaning. I tried to play it off. John glanced at the PC and asked,
Did you see it?
I remained silent.
Listen up. I could take you down anytime I want. You know?
John sneered as he edged closer to me. I wasn't entirely sure that John was doing anything illegal. After all, there was no way I could have seen all the data on his PC in that short amount of time. But judging by his behavior, I was pretty sure he was up to no good.
You're no match for me. Just keep your head down and stay out of trouble.
How much more does he need to look down on me before he's satisfied? I was getting angry at John's attitude, treating people like they're nothing. So, you're cheating, huh?
Shut up, you scum.
It infuriated me that he could cheat, insult others without any remorse, and live it up with the money he made dishonestly.
What's with that defiant look? Don't tell me you think you can beat me.
I had been holding back all this time. I owed a lot to my father-in-law for giving his blessing to my marriage. Above all, it was because he was part of my wife's family. But now, my wife, Emily, has completely fallen under John's influence. She neither defends nor supports me anymore. The moment I thought I didn't have to endure it any longer, something snapped inside me. I will never forgive you. I vowed to myself to revisit everything that had happened up to now with John.
You scum. Well, if you think you can do it, then go ahead and try. Oh, and if you're not family, then get out.
I responded to him with a smile. Yes, thank you. I will do just that. All this time boasting about his high education and being from a political family. And now, high and mighty John is about to be easily brought down by me, just a guy with a high school diploma. I couldn't stop laughing. I immediately went to my wife, Emily, and told her what John had said.
So you're leaving then?
When Emily said this with a smile, I felt completely liberated. I packed my bags and left the house. Having not planned to suddenly leave, I stayed in a hotel for a few days. During that time, I looked for an apartment where I could live alone. Since my job is in real estate, finding a place wasn't too hard. Living alone was truly comfortable. Without having to consider anyone else, I could relax in my space. I was really enjoying my freedom. A few weeks later, the divorce papers I had sent to my wife came back. Checking the contents, Emily had filled out her part properly. Then, I submitted the divorce papers to the courthouse. By becoming officially separated from that family, I felt completely refreshed. Months later, something happened. The doorbell rang, and when I went to the entrance, there was John. For a moment, I wondered how John knew where I lived, but then remembered the mailing of the divorce papers. He must have asked my ex-wife for my address. I decided to open the door.
It's been a while?
Seeing me looking suspicious of him, John continued.
You seem to have reflected, so you're welcome to come back home.
Chilled by his words, I immediately responded, "No, thank you. If you came all this way just to say that, I'm not interested, so please leave." I said it clearly.
All right then. Well, okay.
John then revealed the real reason he had come. During his career as a politician, he had formed a support group and received backing from its members. John had come to ask for financial support for his campaign. I knew about his misconduct. I believed that such support was legally and morally problematic. No, thank you. It struck me how he was still trying to impose his needs on me. Indeed, the true nature of a person seldom changes. John probably still sees me as someone he can use at his convenience.
Are you sure? You might not be able to work anymore. Think about it.
Such blatant threats only made me angrier. I was determined not to lose to someone like him. John had tried to intimidate me with various threats, but I stood firm and forcefully sent him away. A few days later, my ex-wife called. She said she wanted to meet and talk. I had nothing to talk about and refused, but my ex-wife pleaded for just one meeting. Reluctantly, I agreed to meet and talk with her. When I saw my ex-wife after a long time, she seemed somewhat worn out.
You might think it's convenient, but I want to start over.
I immediately refused, thinking how convenient her timing was. I had come to the meeting with the mindset that whatever happened to my ex-wife was none of my concern. I wasn't interested in her current situation, but she started talking anyway. After I left the house, it seems they ran into financial trouble. They had been living off my salary, and John hadn't contributed to the living expenses, which naturally led to problems. John began contributing reluctantly to the living expenses, but his extravagant spending continued as before. As money became tight and his own campaign funds dwindled, John became frustrated and lashed out at his family. He was particularly harsh on his sister, my ex-wife.
Please, I need your help.
Despite the years we had been together, I felt nothing for her. When I needed help, she did nothing for me. Instead, she sided with John and continued to blame me. Memories of that time flashed back in an instant. I was the cheater, right? Asking someone like that for help is insane. I coldly dismissed her. I could no longer trust my ex-wife. Who knew when she might betray me again?
I'm sorry, that was a misunderstanding.
That misunderstanding had caused me a lot of hardship and drained me both physically and mentally. A wife is supposed to stand by her husband, I thought. However, I understood the pain and loneliness inflicted by John since I had experienced it myself. For my ex-wife, John's word was absolute. But I couldn't betray my important partner like that. I'm sorry, but I can't consider getting back together with you, Emily.
That's
My ex-wife broke down crying. John's word is absolute, right? Just believe and follow him. I won't forget your smirk when I said I was leaving the house. I said that to her as she cried, and then I walked away. I thought this would be the last time we would ever meet. A few days after that incident, I had been set to receive a loan for my real estate brokerage business from the bank. But suddenly, the bank declined the loan. At first, I didn't understand what had happened. Thinking calmly, I concluded it must have been John's doing. Apparently, he didn't like that I refused his request for campaign funding. Now, I expected John to use his full power as a politician to influence my business. I developed a strong distrust due to the unjust treatment I received from John. So it started. I had sworn revenge on John and had anticipated something like this might happen sooner or later. I decided to bring to light the fact that John had been engaging in misconduct. I won't let him have his way with everything. Since the evidence I had previously copied onto a USB drive wasn't convincing enough, I hired a detective agency to investigate John. Several weeks later, the detective agency reported back. Indeed, they discovered that John was involved in misconduct. The detective agency thoroughly investigated John's activities. It seems he had been diverting public funds for personal use and taking money from certain businesses using his political influence. This must only be the tip of the iceberg. I provided this information to the media and the police. A few days later, I received a call from John. Something must have happened. Excited, I answered the phone.
Is this your doing?
He shouted as soon as I picked up. That's what I told you, didn't I? I will not forgive you.
You dare? With your high school diploma?
John was ranting over the phone. How does it feel to be easily outdone by a high school grad? John was screaming so much I could barely make out his words. I finally said what I had always wanted to tell him. You're sorely mistaken if you think everything will go your way. You better sit tight in your little cage and reflect on this. In the end, it's you who can't work anymore. With that, I hung up the phone. I had been feeling pent up, but saying those words to John was a huge relief. Later, John was arrested by the police. For his family, who always believed he could do no wrong, the shock must have been immense. This is true especially for my ex-wife, who was deeply shaken by his arrest. At the same time, it seems she was finally freed from John's spell. Since then, my ex-wife has contacted me multiple times.
John was wrong. Kicking you out was a big mistake.
As I listened, I thought it's too little too late. According to my ex-wife, Mary disappeared right after John was arrested. She's gone without a trace, and no one knows where she is. It's shocking to hear such a distinguished family fall apart like this. It seems my former in-law's home has collapsed. Since then, my ex-wife has continually pressed for reconciliation, begging if there is any way we could get back together.
If you come back, I'll do anything. Please, I'm begging you.
Having cleared my head from the recent events, I was indifferent. I have no plans to remarry at this age, nor do I intend to remain single forever. Moreover, while my former in-laws have some savings, it must be tough for my ex-wife to take care of her parents alone. However, I never thought living alone could be so comfortable, so I plan to enjoy it a bit longer. A few weeks later, although I gave in to my ex-wife's requests for reconciliation, I wasn't kind enough to remarry. Instead, I decided to employ her as a housekeeper. This way, she could manage the living expenses for my former in-law's house. Now, my ex-wife busily handles her duties as a housekeeper at my home and takes care of her parents at their home. She comes to my house daily with a smile, cleans, cooks, and then returns home. Apparently, she has deeply reflected and shows no signs of quitting her housekeeping role. As for me, I'm quite content having someone to handle the chores and meals, and I'm enjoying my single life. However, while my ex-wife is currently satisfied working as a housekeeper, I worry about when she might ask to remarry.